fighting out of Danbury, Connecticut, USA, by way of Sao Paulo, Brazil. Here is Alex Pereira.
Alex Pereira is literally the scariest striker on earth.
Alex Pereira!
His power is extraordinary. He flatlines the best fighters in the world. You cannot stand in front of that man.
Though fighting is a game that's played with your fists, knees, feet, and elbows, don't make the mistake of thinking that words can't be just as impactful. Words can cause a whole lot of problems in this world. And when the last stylebender challenged Alex Pereira to do the impossible, this modern great of the combat sports world accepted that challenge gladly. Adesanya made the mistake of ridiculing his old kickboxing rival while sitting pretty atop the UFC middleweight division, living the millionaire lifestyle. He awakened a beast that would eventually pull off the unthinkable. The Alex Pereira story, in either kickboxing or MMA, is not the tale of a blue-chip prospect who was bound to end up on top eventually. It was a slow burn, a story of small gains that eventually turned this once written-off fighter into one of the most undeniable men in the fight game. Born in a favela, in a state of true poverty in Sao Paulo, Brazil, the path walked by this future superstar was not one that initially gave us any hints about his future. He left middle school early, took on jobs as a bricklayer and working in a tire shop. And in this profession, before he was old enough to know what was what, Pereira became an alcoholic, losing all direction in his life until the age of 21, when he decided enough was enough and joined a kickboxing gym. We've heard stories of late entrance to the fighting game, but it's not like Pereira had a real background during his collegiate years. If anything, he was damaging his body during this time. 3 years later, he had turned pro, getting to a pretty decent level in his home country, but not putting together the kind of form that would suggest greatness. Early losses to Cesar Almeida and Jason Wilness capped off a 7-2 run. But while these losses were important steps for Poatan, he would get his revenge eventually. Glory soon came to notice this man's growing talent, and his promotional debut, he KO'd the future UFC roster Dustin Jacoby to announce himself on the scene.
That's what's doing it, and just keep honking with the hands like that.
Shot from Pereira, drops Dustin Jacoby.
From here, Pereira put together a decent run of form in both Glory and other promotions, winning most of the time and losing a couple, but nothing too devastating. When 2016 came, his first meeting with Israel Adesanya was probably the least impactful fight of the series they would eventually share.
很意外啊，3位裁判打出了28-29。
It was a closely contested bout, and while you could make the argument that Israel won, Pereira got the nod. When they rematched in 2017, this was the fight that would truly change both of their lives, even if they wouldn't realize it until years later. A solid showing for the last stylebender in there with Poatan, up until an insanely powerful left hook found its mark, putting Adesanya out cold. With his 2-0 record over Izzy intact, there was little need for a rematch. Adesanya left the sport of kickboxing shortly after, while Poatan went on to become one of the most distinguished glory fighters of his era. With championship belts in 2 different weight classes, and a highlight reel as good as any in combat sports, the Alex Pereira story would have still been a great one if he had rode out his kickboxing prime and retired there and then. But something special was happening over in the world of MMA. The rise of Israel Adesanya into a bona fide mixed martial arts superstar was causing many curious fight fans to go searching for that time he lost by way of violent KO in his old sport. Alex Pereira was not yet a star to MMA fans, but his notoriety for having sparked Adesanya like that was growing, and it was annoying Israel Adesanya, so much so that he ended up making a mistake that would change his legacy forever. When asked about Pereira's kickboxing success and that infamous knockout win, Israel took shots at Poatan, claiming that the win was a fluke, and that Alex would simply be another has-been, sitting in a bar talking about how he once beat a truly great fighter like Adesanya. Was it the dismissive tone? Was it the challenge Israel laid out? Or the fact that he insinuated that this one-time alcoholic would end up exactly where he started? Well, whatever it was that Adesanya said to provoke Pereira, it worked. Despite having a couple of low-level MMA fights earlier in his career, at the age of 33, Pereira left kickboxing and dedicated himself to the pursuit of revenge. When the UFC realized what he was attempting, they certainly made moves to accommodate him, especially when he scored a huge first-round KO in his first MMA bout in 4 years. With just 5 fights under his belt, Pereira had arrived in the UFC, and with his sights set on the middleweight champion of the world, he went 2-0 in his first pair of fights, scoring a huge debut KO of Andreas Michailidis before then getting an invaluable 3 rounds of experience against Bruno Silva. But despite his inexperience, the UFC matchmakers saw nothing but dollar signs in their eyes when the idea of a third fight between him and Adesanya was mentioned. So despite his low-rank status, they opted to give him the one middleweight contender who would have too much pride to try and take him down. Sean Strickland had yet to rise up and claim the belt at this point in time, and in many ways, he was the perfect stylistic opponent to secure Pereira his title fight. Call it a layup if you want, but hey, that's the matchmaking game. And boy, did Poatan deliver, scoring a huge KO win over Strickland in the first round.
Good because he's.
From there, the title fight between Adesanya and Pereira was in reach, the trilogy fight between these two legendary strikers. And in the eyes of the UFC, it was a chance for one of their biggest stars to get revenge after a knockout that had followed him around for far too long. But if that was the script, no one told Poatan. It was a competitive fight, and one that Adesanya was getting the better of. But in that 5th round, something changed. Something stirred in Poatan. We weren't watching this fight from his perspective in a narrative sense. No, Izzy, as he always says to himself, was definitely the main character here. Still, within the fading light of the 5th round, when Poatan finally attacked, we all realized that this moment was a comeback story the whole time. All of a sudden, Izzy began to fold, absorbing shot after shot from one of the most deadly men on the planet. Next thing we knew, Pereira was wheeling away in celebration, the newly crowned middleweight champion of the world, 3-0 over his greatest rival, and not even 10 fights into his MMA career. Naturally, the UFC would look to give Adesanya another shot at the belt. But this rematch would not serve up a second victory in MMA over Izzy for Poatan, nor would it allow him to move to 4-0 over one of the biggest names in combat sports. No, this would be Adesanya's redemptive tale, a fight that saw him dive headfirst into the fire with Pereira and come out with the win.
Pereira's so dangerous.
However, Poatan was not done. Not even close. In a shocking move, he decided to step up to 205 pounds and take on the very man who had proven too much for Adesanya in his own light heavyweight debut, Jan Blachowicz, a title eliminator in every sense of the word. And looking at how Pereira seemed physically in this weight class, it's a wonder that he ever managed to make 185 pounds. Another impressive debut, with a mature win over the hard-nosed former champion to set up a matchup for the vacant belt.
Decision, Alex Pereira.
Across from Alex would stand Jiří Procházka, the champion who had never actually lost his belt, a wild striker in his own right. And against all odds, this might just be Pereira's greatest overall performance in high-level MMA. His hands were slick, of course, but his leg kicks were proven to be too much for his opponents to handle. And when Jiří made the mistake of shooting for a takedown, Poatan proved his progression as an anti-wrestler, pounding him out for the TKO win and a second UFC title. If Israel Adesanya had simply kept his mouth shut, could he have avoided awakening this beast? Maybe, maybe not. But as a two-weight world champion in 2 different combat sports, Alex Pereira has done something that will not be replicated anytime soon. He accepted the challenge of one of the most dangerous men on the planet. And by the time he reached the peak, he had not only beaten his challenger, but he had succeeded in 2-weight world champion status, something Izzy had failed to do himself. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single upload. We'll see you guys in the next one.